Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are, it is right now. You are right here. My name is Manuel, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. Today is day 9 of the show, and I have to congratulate you for making the best decision of the day to spend some time with me. Let's get started. I'd like to begin by giving you a little bit of background about myself, a peek behind the curtains. When I was a small child, I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I attended a Jewish preschool. I'm not Jewish, by the way, but I attended a Jewish preschool called the Learning Tree. And the Learning Tree was associated with the Tree of Life Synagogue. And if the Tree of Life Synagogue sounds familiar to you, it's because it is where several years ago a terrible massacre took place. Seeing that on the news really affected me because those streets that were suddenly on my screen were my childhood streets. That synagogue that was now the location of an unimaginable horror. As a small, innocent child, I had been there. I had looked around at the beauty with wonder and awe. And so, as you can imagine, when it comes to topics like the Holocaust, having grown up in a neighborhood with Holocaust survivors, having attended a Jewish preschool, this is something I really take to heart. And indeed, it influenced the course of my life because ever since I was a small child, I have genuinely and thoroughly studied the Third Reich, the Nazis, the Second World War in Europe. I can still picture, as a small boy, reading books that I didn't really fully understand yet, books that were maybe bigger than I was. And so when we find ourselves today in this environment that we are, where certain current events taking place in our country are constantly, by certain people, being referred to as the Holocaust, when certain government agencies are being referred to as the Gestapo, and anybody who disagrees with this is being called a Nazi, you can imagine I have something to say about that. What we're experiencing collectively as a nation is the phenomenon that I've mentioned before and that we will be discussing many times in the future. Two movies on one screen, meaning that we're all looking at the same screen, but we're watching two movies. We're looking at the same events and seeing different things. In one movie, ICE is the Gestapo and detention centers are Nazi death camps. In another movie, A Nation of Laws, laws which were passed by democratically elected legislators, are now being enforced, and people in the country illegally are being detained and eventually sent home to be back with their friends and families in their home countries. To be very clear, so that you have no doubt about what movie I'm watching, let me say that calling immigration enforcement the Holocaust is the rhetorical equivalent of pulling the fire alarm because you burned your toast. When you say that, you don't get more urgency, you get less credibility. Now, I want to be very clear about something because clarity is extremely important to me. You can oppose ICE policy. You can oppose detention practices. You can oppose family separation. You can oppose rigid bureaucratic cruelty. All of this is your God-given right as an American, and I support your right to that 100% unequivocally. Furthermore, you should always be skeptical of government, always skeptical of authority figures, and always skeptical of official narratives. Always. I'm with you on that. But when you compare deportation to genocide, you're no longer making an argument, you're making a symbolic gesture. And yeah, symbolic gestures can feel good, but they don't move reality. I mentioned earlier a lifetime of studying the Third Reich and the history of World War II in Europe. Along that journey, I had the privilege to spend some years studying under a great Holocaust scholar, the late Professor Herbert Hirsch. Dr. Hirsch spent his life studying what genocide actually is, how it starts, how it escalates, and how societies lie to themselves along the way. And the lesson from him and other like-minded scholars isn't to see Nazis everywhere and in everything. And if I might, as a side note, notice we're at the absurdist point in our national discourse that anytime you disagree with certain people about anything, you're a Nazi. Now, Dr. Hirsch, he taught that genocide is specific. It has intent, it has structure, it has an endpoint. The Holocaust wasn't an overzealous policy that went off the rails. It wasn't bureaucratic indifference or incompetence gone awry. It wasn't even extreme law enforcement. It was an industrial project of annihilation. When you reduce that to a metaphor for everything you don't like, you don't honor the victims. You erase the warning signs. Because if everything is genocide, then nothing is. One of the most dangerous mental models is moral inflation. The idea that escalating language escalates truth. It doesn't. It devalues that currency. Now, let me say, I don't ascribe bad motives to most of the people spreading this hysteria. I know some of them. They're good people with good hearts who have imagined a situation which is terrifying them, sincerely terrifying them. They want to sound the alarm. They want to push back against this perceived fascism. I get it. As a result, they're thinking to themselves, if I use more extreme language, people will wake up. That's not how it works. What actually happens is people tune out. People harden. They retreat to their corners. People stop listening. And the persuadable middle quietly walks away. To my friends who believe that we are in the midst of another Holocaust, those people I mentioned who are good people, sincere people that I know, I want to tell you something. If you really believed ICE was the Gestapo and deportations were the Holocaust, the overwhelming majority of you and everyone else like-minded wouldn't be just part-time protesters, wouldn't be just keyboard warriors, wouldn't be following around the Gestapo blowing whistles. They wouldn't be banging pots and pans to keep ICE agents awake at night, but only when you can get time off of work. You wouldn't be spending the overwhelming majority of your day continuing to live a normal, mundane life. You wouldn't know a moment's rest if the fascist regime that you're imagining were real. On some level, those of you who profess this don't even believe your own propaganda. And that's the tell. That's the reveal. I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. I'm not saying stop criticizing ICE. I'm not trying to stifle your freedom of speech in any way whatsoever. I'm telling you, when Holocaust language is used as a political shortcut, it becomes propaganda, not remembrance. When you do this, you're risking trivializing genocide. The public becomes less able to recognize actual genocide. When everything is labeled the worst thing that ever happened, people stop knowing what worst even means. Now, you've become the boy who cries wolf, and it didn't end well for him. Okay, let's pause there. We'll continue tomorrow. And remember, be useful.